I think Star Trek Voyager mashed up two episodes in a boring way. I don't like to speak ill of Star Trek Voyager, but one Season 4 episode mashed up the premises of two previous episodes in a completely uncreative way. Voyager is hands down my favorite series in the entire Star Trek timeline. The cast has great chemistry and is filled with some heavy hitters. The storylines, especially in later seasons, are engaging and do some great character and relationship work, and I feel like the overall premise brought new life into the franchise in several interesting ways. However, like any show, Voyager had its fair share of dud episodes. One of these duds was, in my opinion, Season 4, Episode 10, Random Thoughts, which saw Star Trek Voyager's cast of characters caught up in an incident when they stopped at a planet of telepaths. While on the planet, B'Elanna Torres, Roxanne Dawson, was accused of being the cause of two attacks because of a violent thought she was unable to control, and almost underwent a procedure that would have left her with neurological damage before the real culprits were found. The episode is interesting on paper, but was actually just a rehash of two other episodes from previous seasons. Random Thoughts was an uncreative mashup of two Star Trek Voyager episodes, if you look closely. The storyline for Random Thoughts is simply a mashup of the Voyager Season 1 episode X Post Facto and the Season 2 episode Meld. In fact, Random Thoughts is almost a beat-for-beat replay of X Post Facto. Both episodes involve a Voyager crew member accused of a crime on an alien planet, and LT, Commander Tuvok, Tim Russ, taking it upon himself to investigate the crime. Meld also involved Tuvok nearly being taken over by violent thoughts and urges, the same way he is in Random Thoughts. The problem is that, while Meld is a good episode, X Post Facto is not, and Random Thoughts gain nothing by being based on it. I've always found Random Thoughts utterly forgettable, and using the episode to redo a storyline that wasn't very interesting in the first place wasn't a great use of Voyager's time. X Post Facto has the advantage of using some film noir tactics that I always found at least somewhat more interesting, but Random Thoughts has none of this appeal. The sad thing is that it could have been a great episode if handled properly. Given its subject matter and character focus, I think that Random Thoughts had the potential to be an interesting episode with a more unique storyline. The idea of thought crime that was explored in the episode is actually one of its stronger parts, and a concept that could have fallen into Star Trek's discussion of real-world issues through the lens of science fiction. Obviously, real life has no telepaths, but the idea of a society that policies people's thoughts while being unaware of a black market for violent memories is a good metaphor for certain aspects of modern life. Along with this, the half-Klingon B'Elanna Torres was a great character to base Random Thoughts on, as her struggle with the more violent side of her personality was an ongoing storyline for her. B'Elanna also didn't get many opportunities to shine in episodes, at least not as many as she, in my opinion, should have. This is why wasting her potential in an episode like Random Thoughts makes the episode's failures all the more tragic. Ultimately, Random Thoughts had the makings of a great Star Trek Voyager installment, but relied too heavily on a previous plot to tell its story. Star Trek Voyager was a show that dared to push the boundaries of science fiction storytelling. The premise alone, stranding a Federation starship 70,000 light-years from home in an unexplored quadrant of the galaxy, was brimming with narrative potential. The crew faced strange new species, moral dilemmas, and internal struggles, all while trying to navigate their way back to Earth. However, for all its innovation, there were times when the writers seemed to fall back on formulaic storytelling, resulting in episodes that felt like lackluster mashups of previous plots. One glaring example of this creative stumble comes in two specific episodes, Threshold and The Fight. Both episodes had ambitious concepts on paper, but in practice ended up as disappointing retreads of familiar science fiction tropes, squandering what could have been unique stories. Instead, these episodes merged aspects of character arcs and scientific exploration in ways that were less than the sum of their parts. Here's why. Threshold. A missed evolutionary leap in Threshold. The episode begins with a promising setup. Lieutenant Tom Paris breaks the Warp-10 barrier, theoretically reaching infinite speed and existing in all places at once. The notion of traveling at Warp-10 had been mentioned before in Star Trek canon as an impossibility, so exploring it opened up the potential for some truly mind-bending narrative threads about space, time, and the nature of existence. However, Voyager takes a very different direction. Rather than diving into the philosophical or existential consequences of Warp 10 travel, the episode devolves into an absurd and biologically implausible storyline. Paris undergoes a rapid evolutionary transformation, turning into a bizarre amphibian-like creature. By the end of the episode, Paris kidnaps Captain Janeway, who then undergoes the same transformation, and the two of them mutate into large salamander-like beings, have offspring, and are later rescued by the crew and return to normal. The episode is infamous for its incoherence and disregard for established science, even within the flexible boundaries of Star Trek's fictional universe. It took a potentially groundbreaking concept about breaking physical limitations and reduced it to an over-the-top, biologically confusing spectacle. There was no real exploration of what breaking the warp barrier could mean on a conceptual or philosophical level, and the focus on Paris's bizarre mutation sidelined any deeper reflection on the implications of infinite speed. The Fight, a telepathic missed opportunity. Now, let's look at The Fight, another episode that falls into the category of ambitious premise, weak execution. In this episode, Voyager becomes trapped in chaotic space, an anomaly where the laws of physics break down. Meanwhile, Commander Chakotay begins to experience visions and hallucinations as the crew struggles to escape the anomaly. His connection to the anomaly appears to be telepathic, influenced by his ancestors' genetic predisposition for such experiences, linking his struggles to a deeply personal, even spiritual journey. On the surface, The Fight promised to explore the nature of the human mind and consciousness in the face of a cosmic unknown. However, much like Threshold, the episode becomes bogged down by confusing visuals and an incoherent plot. The telepathic connection between Chakotay and the chaotic space is not fully explained, and the visions he experiences are disjointed and surreal, but not in a way that enhances the narrative. Rather than using the hallucinations as a window into Chakotay's character, or as a way to explore the psychological effects of chaotic space, the episode focuses on repetitive imagery and a muddled conflict. It becomes increasingly difficult for the audience to follow the stakes or understand what exactly is happening. This is where the mashup failure becomes apparent. The Fight and Threshold share a common problem. Both episodes introduce fascinating sci-fi concepts, but fail to capitalize on them. They trade deep exploration of their themes for surface-level spectacles, confusing visuals, and uninspired plot resolutions. The boring mashup in a way, these two episodes represent the broader issue that Voyager sometimes faced, the need to balance character-driven stories with its larger sci-fi concepts, but not always succeeding. In both Threshold and The Fight, the potential to explore new frontiers, whether it's the limits of space travel or the boundaries of the mind, is undercut by a lack of narrative focus and emotional weight. Instead of pushing these stories to their full potential, Voyager mashed them into conventional Star Trek tropes. Both episodes rely heavily on surreal, disjointed sequences that are meant to reflect inner turmoil or alien experiences, but in doing so, they feel more like recycled plot devices. Threshold boils down to another. The crew member undergoes an alien,